G'day guys, welcome to another video from Crowdrender, and today we're going to look at how to build a render farm really quickly just using a couple of computers. And it's also an opportunity for us to do a shout out about our latest release. We've just updated the software, so we're going to show off some of the new features that we put into version 0.2.1, which you can download from our website. Again, check the link in the description below if you want to have a try. So if you want to follow along with this tutorial, you'll need a couple of computers at least. And you'll also need something to connect them together. A wireless router like this works perfectly. You can use Wi-Fi to connect all your computers together, or you might find you get better results if you use a wired network. A device like this will do both, which is great because then it'll let you test which one works best for you. Okay, so first let's go over the setup. I have a Macintosh laptop here and it's connected wirelessly, and down underneath my desk I have a Windows desktop and a Linux desktop, and they're both connected using, I don't know if you can see it, there's a wireless router just stuck behind my monitor there. So that's how I'm connecting all the computers together. Your setup may vary, but basically you just need each of the computers to be on the same network. Alright, so in this section of the video I'm going to show you how to download, install and get the whole system up and running and rendering. So you just got a handy resource you can refer back to later on when you want to try this out yourself. So the first thing I'm going to do is just open up a new web browser and go and grab the software. So you just type in the address of our website. It's pretty easy to navigate to the download page. If you've never actually created an account before, you will need to do that to download the software. But it's pretty easy. You can either click download, or there's another button here as well. It is an alpha version as well, so I want to make that clear that the software that you're actually going to be downloading is in early stages. So expect features to change and expect there to be bugs and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so I already have an account, so I'm going to log in. You guys don't need to watch that, so I'll skip over that bit. So once you log in, after going through the download links, it should redirect you back to this page. This is the latest release, and you can download it for Blender 2.80 and 279. So you simply just press that download button. And then it should start downloading the add-on. For 2.80, it's about 3 megabytes. It's not very much, it should be fairly quick. Also, consider checking out our crowdfunding page while you're doing this. There are cool ways to support our project, including recurring donations, for which we offer some perks, and you can also do one-off donations just to help us out that little bit as we try and build the best render farm software that there is. Okay, so once that's downloaded, you should find it in your downloads. It's a zip file and it's dead easy to install. For that we're going to have to start Blender, so I start Blender from the command line, but you just start Blender any way that you feel comfortable doing it. So once Blender's started, we're going to need to install an add-on. So that's done through user preferences. So you go to Edit, Preferences. If you already have Crowdrender installed, you will have to remove it. You can usually do this fairly easily. I'm on a Macintosh, and any Unix system like Linux or MacOS, you can just remove it like that. It disappears. And now we'll cover installing. Windows is a separate case I'll cover in a different time code in this video, so check the description below for the time code for the Windows install, because you can't remove it very easily if you've actually been using the previous add-on. There's a workaround for it, so you might want to check that out. We've just clicked the install add-on button, we go to our downloads folder and we go searching for the file we just downloaded, which will be named like this, cr_version of the add-on, and then bl280 for the version of Blender it supports. We're using 0.2.1 today, so I click install. It will install the add-on. It won't be enabled by default. Enable it, and then click start. Now after you click start, you should notice that you get a new panel. Now yours might be hidden all the way down here. I usually bring mine to the top, and then expand it, and then you should see that you have some render controls, a list of render nodes, and some other controls at the bottom, and another control for cloud rendering, which I'll get into later in the video. So if you see that you've got the Crowdrender panel laid out like this, then your system is most likely up and running and ready to use. So the first thing you can do to test that it's working is just do a quick test render just using one computer to start with, which is what's called this machine here. So this line here represents the computer that you're currently working from. You can disable it from rendering if you choose, but I'm going to enable it just to do a quick proof test. using the Eevee render engine. And what you should see if the add-on is working properly is that you'll get a render happening like this, and then you should get a resulting image. Might take a bit long depending on your particular hardware. I mean, I'm working from a laptop, so it's pretty slow. I don't have a GPU in it either. Okay, so that's working. So the next thing we're going to do is go and do exactly the same thing on the Windows and the Linux machine. So on the left we've got Linux and on the right we've got Windows, and these are the screencasts from the two computers I have under the desk you saw earlier in the video, and we're going to set them up exactly the same as the Mac. All three will have to have Blender open and the add-on running for the system to work. So the procedure is pretty much the same. You download the same add-on too. There is one add-on for all three operating systems, so that just makes it easier for you. You don't have to download one for a specific OS. You can download the same add-on, it'll just install fine. Also, a quick and cheeky plug for our crowdfunding campaign. We are looking for regular donations to help us support both our website and our outreach and all the development that we do, and we're starting off with a small target to help us get just the funds we need to keep our website open. So please check that out, that really helps. Okay, back to Blender. So we've got now Blender open and running, and we're just making sure that if there is a previous version of the add-on installed, we remove it completely, otherwise things don't work. Now on the left on Mac, on Mac, don't hate me Linux people. On the left, Linux, it's really easy to remove. You just click remove and then you can install a new one. Unfortunately for Windows on the right, you'll notice occasionally when you try to do it, you get an error. The way to solve that problem is to launch Blender without having the add-on enabled. So if you do have the add-on enabled and that's saved in user preferences, turn that off, resave user preferences and try again. Then you should be able to remove it. Now in some cases, as what happened to me when I was recording this video, even when you do that it may not work. So keep them peeled for this workaround I'm going to do right now. So it's not going to work because I know that, I recorded it. What you can do is close Blender, then open up your task manager and then look for any background processes which have the name Blender in them. We do use background processes of Blender to do stuff, and if one of those hasn't closed then you won't be able to remove the add-on. You can also try going to your scripts folder, and this is a really easy way to uninstall it. You just find the Crowdrender folder in your scripts folder and then you just delete it. And that is it uninstalled, and now you can go ahead and install a new one. And again, it's the same procedure to install it. You just click the install from file button, look for the download wherever you saved it. Usually it's in your downloads folder if you've downloaded it through a web browser, and then click on the file and then just click install. And don't forget to enable it. And then also, once you've enabled it, find the Crowdrender panel and then press start. And that's it. You're ready to go. Okay, so now we've got the add-on running in both Windows, Linux, and on this Macintosh machine as well. So everything's ready to now try and connect and render. So before I do that, I'm just going to show you a little bit about this panel that we've opened. So the Crowdrender panel has controls for rendering, which you should be quite familiar with for rendering stills and animations. So you use these buttons, not F12 or the render panel up here. And you select your render engine as you would normally. So if you want to do cycles, you set it to cycles, Eevee to Eevee. And then you basically use the Crowdrender panel to render. Underneath that, there's the render nodes list, which we're going to be looking at now, because obviously we want to connect. So here is a list of all of your computers. Now, you may find when you first start the add-on, you have nothing in here. Now, the reason I have computers in here is because I have a Crowdrender Cloud account, and I've actually logged these machines into that account, and that's why they show up for me. You can also save your home file. If you want to enter computers manually, once you save your home file with them in, then they'll appear every time you start Blender. But I've decided to use the other method, which is to have each of these computers logged in. And that just means that they show up here every time I start Blender. If you want to know how to log in, basically once you've created an account to download the software, you can use the same email and password and log in here. I'm currently logged in. Yeah, you can log out by just clicking this button. You enter your email and password into this and it will log this computer in, which will make it actually appear in this list of nodes on other computers. So I've done that on the Windows and the Linux machine. They're both logged in and they're actually showing up here because they're currently switched on and enabled with the add-on running. So now I can just go ahead and connect to them. So I'm going to hit this button and connect to the Linux machine, which is running Ubuntu. It's running, I think, 19.04, and it's using Blender 2.81 as well. You should get some status updates here, which just tell you what's happening. They also appear in this list. So if you want to review what's happened, you can actually go into this list and look at all the feedback from that computer, which can be useful for troubleshooting. If it's too much, you can filter it. I'm going to turn that off. This is one of the new features we'll discuss a little bit more in the rest of the video. Right now I'm just going to go and connect to the computers and show you how to render real quick. We're just going to do a very fast cycles render. Alright, so with both of the machines connected, you should see that they're synced. If they happen to be sync failed, which can happen with some projects, you can try a resync, which just resends the blend file again, so you can see it uploading there. This is usually good practice if you're doing a final animation render. You want to make sure everything is perfect and up to date with your file. Resync will make sure that all of the project data in your blend file is re-uploaded as it is currently on your master machine or your client machine. Okay, so let's go ahead and render. So now that I've got all the computers synced, I know the file's there, I can just come up here and hit render still. I'm going to obviously use cycles because there's little point using Eevee. It's quick enough as it is. So just hitting render, we'll see we get feedback here, so we can see that there are tiles being rendered. Also, we can click here as well in this list, and we can check what the actual output from the render process is. This is a filterable record of all of the output from that render node, which can be handy for troubleshooting. Alright, there you have it. So we've basically rendered just the default scene, which isn't all that exciting, but I'll just now walk you through some of the features that if you're new to Crowdrender you might not know exist, and they're actually quite useful. So one of the cool things our add-on can do is if I select the cube and I rotate it and scale it up, now normally if you made changes like this with other render farm software, you'd notice that you'd have to resync your entire project, but actually these computers stay synced if you're just making simple edits like this. That edit will basically be sent to all the other computers without having to send the blend file. So you can make really quick changes and then re-render. So if you're wanting to do tests or debug stuff or just change composition or material settings, you can just re-render it real fast. So you can see we've been able to render the modifications to that scene without having to do any kind of file re-uploading or project resynchronizing. So for little changes, yeah, you can actually test really quickly, which is kind of the heart of what Crowdrender is about. It's about enabling rapid iteration. So in more complex projects, you may find that you want to turn off the computer you're working on from rendering just because you can actually still use it for other things while the render is continuing in the background. So a number of people have asked us how to set up a render so they can work on something else. Again, that's more of an advanced sort of use case, but you can check out our forum. We've got lots of discussion around that particular issue, but it is possible. But just for the purposes of demonstration today, I'm going to set up a couple of cloud nodes. So if you don't know what cloud nodes are, they're basically servers that we rent from Blender Grid, and we make those available to you. So if you have an account with us, you can basically charge it with a bit of credit, and then you can rent some fairly powerful servers. So when I say fairly powerful, these things are 36 threads, 72 gigabytes of RAM, Xeon Platinum processors. So they are fairly powerful. Essentially what you do is inside your cloud account, if I go back to cloud account here, so if you go to home, let's quickly show you how this works. If you go to your profile, then you can actually recharge your account here. And you can do that in increments of 10, 20, 50, or another amount if you wish. That's all done through PayPal and is secure and has all the usual protections you have for doing that. So once you've recharged your account with credit, you'll find that it appears here, and then you can select how many servers you want. I'm going to ask for 2, and then I'm going to click Start Cloud Nodes. Okay, so once you see that you've got starting server node 1 or 2 or however many you've asked for, You've probably got about a minute to a minute and a half to run before they're actually usable. This just means that the nodes have actually started now, and you should see your credits starting to fall, and eventually you'll see them change and become white and all bold like your other computers have been, or like this if I turn this on and off. And that means, yeah, they're ready to use. One other thing I'll point out is if you have problems, you'll see this little triangle with the exclamation mark light up, and it'll tell you about any problems that you have in here. Generally, I like to clear this out before I start, just so I know that I've got only the problems which I've had this particular session. At the moment, we're having issues where it says failed to get user credit, but that's actually not true. It does actually get your user credit. It is actually accurate, or at least fairly accurate. So we've got basically it's a null warning. It doesn't mean that you can't actually get your credit. Okay, so you now see that both of these have turned white, which means they're ready to use. And they basically just get given a random name. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here and try to connect to one. So after clicking the little chain icon, there might be a little bit of a wait as it gets the address it needs, and then you just hit OK. And then you should see the similar thing. You'll see it say ready, you'll see it say syncing, uploading, and it's going to push all of the data inside your blend file up to the cloud. And this is an important, opportunity for me to mention that if you've got a project with lots of external files, you really need to make sure you've got them all packed into your blend file before you actually do the uploading. If you forget, the best way to deal with that is to pack everything into the blend file and then hit the resync button to send it all again. So make sure before you connect to either your cloud nodes or any computers you have for that measure that you've actually got all of the data packed into the blend file, because all our software does is send the blend file. Alright, so I'm going to connect to this other computer as well. And don't worry if one of these nodes does grey out for a second, just try connecting to it anyway. Sometimes the interface is a little bit slow to update because there can be a lot of delay on the internet. As you can see there now, it's uploading. So I'm sending not very much data. This file's about 3 megabytes, but I'm sending it between Australia and America, so there is quite a bit of delay, which slows down the rate at which I can send it. But you can see it's not too bad. Your mileage may vary. Really depends on the connection you've got. Obviously, the better the upload speed you get, then the faster this part will go. Alright, so now they're synced. Now we can try rendering with these cloud nodes. Now I'm just going to use these two to start with. There is a quirk in our load balancer, and by the way, a load balancer is just something that figures out how much rendering to give to each machine. And that quirk is the first time a computer is rendered on, it is given a default speed at which we think it renders. Which means if there are other computers which have rendered, they will have accurate data and the new ones will not. It'll just be a guess, and that guess is very low, which means they will actually not render very much at all. In fact, they'll render a tiny bit of the screen just to get a sample of how fast they are. That's a limitation, and it's an important one. It generally means that if you've got a brand new computer which hasn't yet rendered and other computers have, you pretty much want to either render just on those computers or basically use manual mode. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn everything else off and just use these two together, which means by default they'll get an equal share of the screen to render. So let's give that a shot. Okay, so you should see once you've pressed the render button, you should see that they're rendering, which is really cool. You'll see how long it takes for them to do the render, and then you'll see also how long it takes for them to actually get the finished images back from the cloud. And that can take a while. Again, it depends on how fast your speed is. So we can see we rendered that scene in about 20 seconds, which is incredibly quick compared to what my laptop would have done it in. It's one of the reasons I like using this service. I use it myself for doing little pet projects, just because it takes so much less time. In fact, you'll notice it actually takes way longer sometimes to get the tiles back, depending on their size, obviously, than it does to render it. So the render time was like 21 seconds for the stock BMW benchmark, and it actually took 50 seconds for the actual render to complete, plus a little bit for the compositing. So if we want to optimize this, obviously what we do is we turn all the other computers on, and then we just hit render again. The problem, again, with our load balancer is it needs to learn how strong each computer is, and that can take a few frames. So if you're doing this just out of the box without debugging or testing or tuning anything, you might find that it's not really that quick at all. In fact, a lot of people do tell us the first time they use it, it's slower than just doing a single render. And this is the reason why. It needs to learn. It needs to render a few frames just to figure out how much of the screen to give to each computer. It is something we are working very hard on changing, and it will be a lot better in the future, but for now you just need to know this is an important limitation. Please be patient with it. So what should you do? One way is just to hit the render button and see what it does. All of these computers now have a little bit of render data. They'll all render together, which I think is pretty cool. I don't know if you guys think it's pretty cool, but what will happen is you'll notice that each of the computers gets a certain amount of the screen now, and you may judge it, as I'm about to judge it, that maybe it should have given more to these very powerful cloud nodes and less to these other slower computers because they're not finished yet. So this is one of the problems you're going to encounter when you're using Crowdrender for the first time. You may see this and you go, why? Why is it not given more of the screen to the more powerful computers? And that's a good opportunity to experiment with manual mode, which we'll do in a sec. So I might just cancel this render now, because I know it's going to take a while. These computers, obviously, that I have here are much, much less powerful than the ones in the cloud. So I'm just going to cancel that. Alright, so what can we do to fix this? Basically, we have the load balance menu, so we can actually come in here and set up manual load balancing. This in itself can be a little bit buggy as well, just because we have the local, which we should set to 0. That's not set to 0 by default, and it takes a couple of goes to do it. Then we have obviously all of these other computers. Now I want to give more to the cloud, so let me give about 2/3 to that one, 1/3 to that one. You can see how it can be a bit finicky. I'm going to give a little bit more to this guy, just using shift. Alright, so I think that's probably good. I'm going to set this back to 0, so it shouldn't have any at all. Like you can tell, we've got a little bit of work to do in this area, but you can, with persistence and patience, get it to work okay. So I've set this to manual now, so what should happen is when I hit the render still button, is we should find that things are a little bit better. We should find that those two cloud nodes, which are more powerful, get a much larger share of the screen to render, and the other machines get less, and it's a bit more evenly balanced, which you can kind of judge by eye by looking here. You can see that, yeah, these computers are kind of all finishing roughly about the same time, with maybe the Linux machine got a little bit too much to render. But that's a heck of a lot better. You can see that we're going to have a much better render time, more or less. Like we're 25 seconds, so hopefully we beat 49 seconds. Finish the compositing. Okay, 43 seconds, so a little bit better. Again, there is a problem with the delay of getting the files back, but we can actually improve on that as well. If we're just doing this for tests, we can change the compression codec. So this compression codec here, so this is in the render nodes list, we can actually choose it something which is lossy instead of lossless. Now, if you are concerned about quality and compositing downstream, that you're going to lose color information, then you may want to just stick with lossless, but lossless files are pretty huge. And bearing in mind, when you start putting lots of render layers and lots of passes into your project to use in the compositor, you're going to make those render images even bigger, and it's going to take longer to get them back from remote nodes. Okay, so I've chosen PXR24, which is Pixar 24 Lossy. This is the smallest format by far, so let's give that a go. Remember, we had to beat, I think, 43 seconds. So we'll see if we can beat 43 seconds of render time this time. Now, I haven't changed anything. I haven't changed the load balancing, so we're going to get more or less the same result for rendering. What we're trying to do here is optimize the amount of time it takes to actually get the render results back. Okay. And compositing. So there you go, 34 seconds instead of 43 seconds. So depending on what you're doing, you may want to play with these settings. It might help you get a much better result. Okay, so I'm going to stop my cloud nodes now because obviously I don't want to chew up all my credit just doing tests. I'm going to save it for later. So to do that, I just hit stop. And that's pretty much the use of the cloud. So I think this is good. I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments, like, what do you think about it? I mean, I'll be honest about it, it is a bit rough around the edges. The software is at a state which is, like I've said, it's alpha software, so sometimes you might find that a render animation job, so if you're rendering, let's say, 500 frames, if one of the frames for some reason doesn't render on a node, there's a chance that the entire job will stop. We have put protections in for that. If your computer turns off or crashes or loses a power supply, within about 5 minutes, all of your cloud nodes will shut down because they're not getting any more information from the client, and that protects your account. As for pricing, like I said, it's about $1.80 an hour per machine. So I did the math on this earlier. Rendering this frame costs about 1.6 cents. So I think that's pretty good, but if you guys out there know of a more economical solution, please let us know. We would love to get more data about this service. It is pretty early on. We're trying to improve it and make it better. So any feedback from the community about what they think about it, whether it's good value or not, whether it works for you, whether it helps you projects or not, let us know. Okay, so the last thing I did want to look at is just the main new feature which we've added in 0.2. So that's this list here. I'm just going to show you a pretty cool thing you can do with it, which will help you if you've got animations which are a bit more complicated and you're using external libraries, like you've got linked or appended Blender assets or textures or any of that kind of stuff. So I'm going to go and find a scene that I've set up purposely for this. Classroom, here we go. Okay, so some of you may recognize this the moment I open it. It's another one of the benchmarks from Blender, and you'll notice I've purposely, sabotaged this one, because I've changed all of the external references, so it's missing everything. So normally Classroom, you'll recognize, has a whole bunch of tables and chairs in here, but I've gotten rid of all those. One of the main problems you'll first notice is Crowdrender thinks that these are synced, and you probably would be forgiven for thinking that, oh, hang on, there's like a whole bunch of stuff missing. Does it not pick up on that? So one of the things you have to realize is Crowdrender just looks at the data it actually tracks, and it doesn't track everything. It doesn't track animation data. It doesn't track poses or shape keys. It just tracks objects mainly and materials, basic stuff. It will transfer everything, absolutely everything, to your render nodes when you connect and upload or do a resync, but it's only going to tell you things are synced that it knows about, because the syncing is part of the live real-time update part. So you can actually have a whole bunch of changes which are not even recognized. And to make a case in point, if I hit now render on the scene, so they say they're synced, but really we know there's a lot of stuff missing, which is not picked up on. Okay, so one of the things we're going to have to do is learn how to use this new tool, because this tool is going to help you pick up on problems. So when you hit render for the first time, what you'll be able to do is actually access all of the data in here. So all of this data will actually tell you if there's anything missing, because this is the output from the render process. So now I can search for warnings, and sure enough I get warnings about a whole bunch of stuff being missing. So one of the things you can do is to test your scene before you commit it to a long overnight render, is to basically just do a quick render and then come and check the output of each of the nodes for warnings. Much easier than waiting 30 minutes to an hour for a test frame or a set of test frames to be complete and then finding there's problems because there's stuff missing. So that's what we built this particular new feature for. One of the other new features I'm going to touch upon real quick as well, before we close out the video, is we've now fixed hybrid rendering. So Jeremy was working really hard on making sure that when you select a GPU, my computer doesn't have a GPU, but if there was one, you can now select and deselect the CPU properly, and this will actually completely override whatever settings might have prevailed on that render node, and it will just use what you set in this panel to render. So if you want to use an OpenCL or a CUDA based GPU with your CPU on that machine, then you can do that. Okay, so those are pretty much the two major new features in 0.2.1, and that's a tutorial about how to get our software up and running. Now, there are probably use cases where you find that you might have problems. That's normal. It's alpha software. We're still trying to figure out what features you guys need, and we would love your feedback, and we'd also love your support. So I'm going to close out the tutorial here and go back to the other me who recorded a proper ending for this video and leave you there. So there you have it, guys. That's how to create a render farm really quickly, even from just 2 or 3 computers you have in your office, with a little bit of software magic. It doesn't take that long, and I really hope you give it a try. So if you do, please let us know in the comments below. I'd love to hear about your adventures in getting your render times down. Finally, please like and share this video around if you think it was useful. Also, there should be a subscribe button appearing somewhere here, so make sure you hit that subscribe button if you want to follow along. We'll be releasing more versions of software, making updates, and trying to listen to your feedback and improve things. And also, we do have an ability for you to help out. So if you go to our website, link in description, you'll see that we have a crowdfunding campaign. You can donate to development. You can also use our cloud rendering system, which will give you 36 core, 72 gig of RAM, Xeon-based servers alongside your own hardware, so you can boost your render power. And again, all of the revenue from that goes towards developing the software and making it better, which is awesome. So I'm going to sign off. Hope to see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.